You know, I think that most people can probably agree that Monolith Studios is one of the greatest developers, like, ever. You know, the guy's known for creating Shadow of Mordor and its groundbreaking Nemesis system, scaring the pants off people with their excellent Condemned series, and more recently, they're kinda known for being one of the latest victims of the studio shutdown massacre that's been going on. But they're also known for creating some of the single greatest shooters of all time, including Blood, the No One Lives Forever games, and the subject of this video, F.E.A.R. Yeah, dude, the F.E.A.R. games absolutely ruled, or at the very least, the first two. But I think this series really has earned its place among the all-time greats thanks to its fantastic slow-mo shooting, its AI tech, and its super creepy antagonist, Alma.
What the fuck?
I mean, hell, I think people who have never even touched a F.E.A.R. game probably recognize her. And even to this day, we still get games that are heavily inspired by F.E.A.R. and what it did all the way back in 2005, which, let me remind you, was 20 years ago. Yeah, shit.
I'm old, Gandalf.
And it's a series that I still play almost yearly, if only to act as a bit of a palate cleanser between some of those larger AAA titles that we get. Of course, since we're about as likely to see another F.E.A.R. game as I am to see my dad return from going out to buy that pack of cigarettes, I figured we might as well just talk about the whole series, one game at a time. So let's bicycle kick our way into this, starting with F.E.A.R. 1.
What about you, buddy? Ready to go to work? I think he can handle himself.
Whatever, man. It's your call.
So, the basic premise of F.E.A.R. is that you play as a voiceless protagonist, simply referred to here as the Point Man, after he's assigned to the First Encounter Assault Recon Team, or F.E.A.R. for short. Created to deal with paranormal threats, the F.E.A.R. team is now being dispatched to deal with Armacam, a company that primarily develops military technology. Except a lot like how Resident Evil's Umbrella was secretly testing the T-virus, Armacam has been up to no good, and now trouble's finally made its way to the neighborhood. In this case, that's attempting to create an army of clones, or replicas, capable of being controlled by a psychic commander. And just like the T-virus escaping, creating a whole host of problems for the community of Raccoon City, Armacam's commander, Paxton Fettel, has escaped and is now using his army to wreak havoc in Fairport, the city that the F.E.A.R. games take place in. So it's up to you to find and take out Fettel, neutralizing all of those clones in the process. And I mean, that's really all there is to it, at least initially. Of course, that's easier said than done.
Hey, you.
Because it really doesn't take long at all for you to realize that there's more going on here than what it seems. You'll start seeing visions, having weird flashbacks, and getting regular visits from a ghostly little girl. And you'll spend most of the game alone, but occasionally you will meet up with other characters like teammate Jin Sun Quan, Alice Wade, who's the daughter of a scientist, Harlan Wade, and this guy, Norton Mapes. A dude so slimy, I'm honestly kinda surprised that he can get his fat ass stuck in this vent the way that he does.
Who are you people?
The good guys. Are you alright?
Oh, sure. I'm having a hell of a time.
And what I really appreciate about F.E.A.R's narrative is how it handles storytelling. In F.E.A.R, there are almost no actual cutscenes. Story moments are handled in-game when you are still in control. Like, take this scene where Alice Wade is attempting to escape. You never see a cutscene of her fleeing or anything like that. You just make it to the parking garage just in time to see her peeling out.
Miss Wade! Fuck it. Get to the roof of the parking garage for pickup. You can still get there before her.
And it's sort of the same thing in the finale when you can see the nuclear core of Armacam's facility detonate. This easily could have been a cinematic, but F.E.A.R lets you experience the devastation firsthand. And the only game I can really think of that has anything like this in it is Call of Duty Modern Warfare, which wouldn't come out for another 2 years. Most of the story is also handled either through visions, radio calls, computer logs, or through phone messages left on machines.
You have one new message.
We've been trying to reach you concerning your car's extended warranty.
And while I do think the story of F.E.A.R is super interesting and well worth paying attention to, I can really appreciate a game letting the player get as much story as they want out of it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's a big reason why games like BioShock, Doom 2016, Prey, and F.E.A.R are just super replayable for me. You know, these games that don't make a habit of breaking the pace with too many cutscenes. What I also appreciate is just how self-aware F.E.A.R is of its own premise. I mean, right from the jump, even this guy thinks the whole thing is completely ridiculous.
Fettel is one of the commanders.
You gotta be fucking kidding me. This is why nobody takes us seriously. Military clones.
A full battalion of them, highly trained and heavily armed.
You know, creating a literal army of clones, then giving a single person control over all of them, not thinking for a single second what might happen if that guy figures out he has control of an army and can kind of just do whatever the hell he wants to. It's that whole thing of never really stopping to think, you know, if they should. Of course, there's also Alma and the role she plays in the narrative. Because really, despite the army of clones and Fettel being the more pressing concern, she's really at the center of everything. Because as you'll find out, Armacam built the entire replica program off of her and her psychic abilities in a program called Project Origin. Alma was put into a coma at age 7 and later on was artificially impregnated and gave birth to 2 sons, Fettel and you, the Point Man. Eventually, she was killed, but not before linking her consciousness to Fettel, which is why she can kind of project herself in places where he is. And man, project herself she does, scaring the absolute shit out of you when you least expect it.
Fuck this.
But what I really like is that she doesn't just always show up as a jump scare, but is just kind of seen off in the distance. Sometimes too, you'll just find the aftermath of her presence, where she's used her psychic powers to paint the room with whatever poor guy was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
What do you think, Jen?
There was a lot of anger in this room.
That's great. Got anything useful to add?
So like, despite being a bit of a cliche, Alma is still super creepy, if only because she really gives that feeling that she's always watching, adding a sense of dread to what would otherwise be a game relying on jump scares, complete with that horror sting.
Lord, I'm having a heart attack. Damn, this is some scary shit. Oh, I am scared.
What's worth mentioning too is that for a game from 2005, F.E.A.R still absolutely holds up when it comes to presentation. Taking place in the city of Fairpoint, a lot of F.E.A.R's environments are pretty mundane as far as actual locations go. I mean, you've got a water treatment plant, an office building, an abandoned apartment complex, and underground labs. And all of these are pretty drab when it comes to color, you know, at least compared to other games of the era like Halo 2, which came out just a year earlier, and Oblivion, which was less than a year later. Both of which were games that really had colorful and stylized visuals, mostly I think to offset the lack of detailed textures that we had at the time.
As unlikely as your story sounds, I believe you.
But what F.E.A.R lacks in that sort of color, it more than makes up for with interactivity. F.E.A.R was developed with Monolith's own Jupiter EX version of their lift tech engine, and this engine absolutely kicks ass. Pretty much everything is destructible in every environment. You can destroy electronics, tear chunks out of walls, and leave clouds of blood and dust everywhere. Plus, there'll be shell casings and bits of whatever poor replicant you just shotgunned all over the floor and walls. I mean, at the end of every firefight, you'll be able to see the absolute carnage left behind. And on top of that sort of destruction and interactivity is the usage of light and shadows. Doom 3 had come out just a year prior, and that game made really excellent use of lighting effects in order to create that sense of dread in every environment. And F.E.A.R really takes a page from Doom 3's playbook in that regard. Lights flicker, your muzzle flashes light up dark interiors, and you have a flashlight to help you see in those especially dark areas. And I mean, the only thing about the flashlight is that it has a limited battery, meaning you'll have to stop and let it recharge. And when so many environments are darker than a well digger's butt crack, it just means that you're constantly stopping and just kind of twiddling your thumbs while that little bar refills. But I mean, look, for a game from 2005, F.E.A.R is honestly still pretty impressive when it comes to environments and how you interact with them. I mean, hell, some modern games don't have this sort of interactivity. And it's also pretty hard not to appreciate the lighting effects.
Impressive. Very nice.
And I think it really just goes to show the kind of creativity devs had back in that 6th gen era. You know, when they're really trying to squeeze out every last bit of what PCs and consoles were capable of. But all that stuff really is incidental to what F.E.A.R is all about. And what F.E.A.R is all about is kicking, shooting, and exploding guys in slow motion. Yeah, man, F.E.A.R is still one of the most satisfying FPS games you can play, being both a first-person shooter, but then also a sort of gun-fu shooter, like Max Payne. And just like Max Payne's bullet time, F.E.A.R lets you slow down time with what's called reflexes, giving you time to react and, more accurately place your shots. And I mean, this is just a gameplay mechanic that never gets old. You've got those awesome looking visual effects of the bullets whizzing through the air, along with enemies reacting and having that slow, pitched down voice effect. And then everything is flying around the environment along with dust and blood clouds. And I mean, it just makes for an immensely satisfying shooter experience. You can also lean around corners, which does really come in handy, especially when dealing with the heavier enemies or when you're just sort of running low on health. But I think few games have mechanics with as much raw fun factor as F.E.A.R does. I mean, just being able to enter a room full of bad guys, slow down time, and lay into them with everything you've got, while they just let out these death screams and ragdoll around is absolutely excellent. Like, this is why I play video games. And on the subject of the combat, I think anyone who talks about F.E.A.R is actually obligated to talk about the enemy AI, under threat of being subjected to that sort of cock and ball torture from Casino Royale. And yeah, the enemy AI really is worth the praise that it's gotten over the last 20 years. Building off the same AI tech from their prior games, Monolith also utilized goal-oriented action planning, which let the enemies not just react to the player, but actively decide on a goal and how best to achieve it. And what this leads to is enemies working together to outmaneuver you constantly. If you hide, they'll flank you or flush you out with a grenade. If you approach them, they'll reposition, and if you use a grenade, they'll more often than not be able to get out of the blast radius. And I mean, compare that to a lot of other games, where enemies will just sort of hunker behind cover until you can get an angle on them, or they'll just mindlessly rush you, letting you eliminate them from the gene pool with basically little to no effort. And whenever the enemies are working to execute a plan, they make callouts to each other, letting you know what the next move is so you can react and plan accordingly. It just makes for a really engaging experience where you and the enemies are constantly acting and reacting in a sort of tug of war, rather than, simply entering shooting gallery after shooting gallery. Now, when it comes to the actual guns you're using to commit clone genocide, there's actually quite a bit of variety, with all of them being really fun to use. You'll start off with a single pistol, being both capable of firing about as fast as you can click, as well as being super accurate. It can also be dual-wielded, allowing for an even faster firing rate with a higher ammo count. And these things were actually one of my preferred weapons. Because I mean, if you're gonna play a game with bullet time and not use two pistols, what the hell are you even playing for?
No, he's got a point.
But beyond those, you've also got a submachine gun, sort of based on an MP5, capable of firing at a high fire rate, but with lower damage output. Then you've got a basic assault rifle, firing slightly slower than the submachine gun, but with a higher damage output. And it doesn't take long at all for you to get your hands on the shotgun. Based on the Spaz 12, this thing is easily one of the best shotguns in any game, capable of taking out most enemies in a single close-range shot. And what I love most about this is how enemies react to getting shot. Either being sent flying in a ragdoll, having various limbs blown off, or being outright reduced to a cloud of red mist.
This is like the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I know.
There's also the Penetrator, which, aside from being my nickname in high school, is also a weapon capable of firing powerful and highly accurate bolts that can stick enemies to nearby walls. Then there's the Particle Cannon, which, a lot like Alma, is capable of reducing enemies down to skeletons. Now, there aren't any sniper rifles in F.E.A.R, but there is the ASP, this scoped assault rifle, that you don't get your hands on too much, and honestly is kind of one of the least useful weapons in the entire game. There are only a couple of situations where a scope is handy, and more often than not, you're just better off using the regular assault rifle. Finally, there are two explosive weapons, with the rocket launcher and the repeating cannon, both of which are highly effective against the super heavy mech units the game is going to throw at you towards the end. There's also a variety of grenades, like a remote control sticky bomb, a proximity mine, and a standard grenade that, thanks to the enemy AI, would be useless if not for the fact that it detonates on contact with living enemies. And getting a direct hit with that grenade on a group of enemies during reflex time is easily one of the most satisfying things you can do in a video game. I mean, it's up there with parrying, getting critical headshots, and finally convincing that romanceable NPC to give it up.
Report to the ship as soon as possible. We're bang, okay?
But I mean, as much as I really enjoy the combat, F.E.A.R ain't a perfect game. And what I really mean by that is how it handles difficulty. You gotta remember that this was in a time before that mechanic of hiding behind covers so you could slowly refill your health was really a mainstream thing. So instead, in typical old school fashion, F.E.A.R has you using medkits that you can find scattered all over the environment. You can carry up to 10 of these at a time, and you're gonna need all of those to survive some of the firefights that you'll find yourself in. Cause on those higher difficulties, enemies can take you out near instantaneously. So there would be times when I'd be caught out in the open, and even with the reflex mode, I'd be spamming the heal key just to not die before I could take out the rest of the enemies. Thankfully, you can find body armor to mitigate that damage, as well as find these boosters to increase your health capacity, as well as the time you can spend in reflex mode. And you're really gonna want to keep an eye out for these, because again, on these higher difficulties, enemies can put you down before you even know what the hell happened to you. And yeah, maybe it's a skill issue, but I've played F.E.A.R for years now, and that medkit system has always felt a bit off to me, something I can't really quite say for the rest of the combat systems. And I think it's something Monolith knew as well, because F.E.A.R 2 would go on to reduce the medkit count from 10 to 3, and keep your health bar at a static amount. Now, as good as F.E.A.R is, I actually think that some of the best parts of it were saved for the DLC expansions, those being Extraction Point and Perseus Mandate. Developed by Timegate rather than Monolith, the first DLC, Extraction Point, takes place immediately after the ending of the main campaign, which saw your team escaping, but with Alma having caught up to you.
What was that sound?
Well, after miraculously surviving both a nuclear blast and a helicopter crash, your team is once again split up, and you make your way to a nearby hospital for extraction. You'll fight your way through some cool new environments, including a church, a subway, a construction site, and a hospital. And these are all areas that F.E.A.R really benefits from, letting the player experience something unlike anything else in the main game. I mean, that subway level is a ton of fun, dude, and really pays homage to one of F.E.A.R's main inspirations, Max Payne.
Death was in the air at Roscoe Street. I'd have to find Alex fast.
The hospital is another fantastic area. And I mean, look, man, F.E.A.R is just as much a horror game as it is a shooter. And what the hell would a horror game be without a spooky hospital? Extraction Point also sees you actually team up with a squad mate for a while, rather than, fight the whole thing alone. And it's with this guy that F.E.A.R actually starts to show a bit of deviation with his objectives. Whereas before, you more or less always just had to clear an area of enemies, then flip a switch or something like that.
That should do it.
But here, you have to cover him from a tower in the construction site, as well as hold off waves of enemies, something the DLCs will actually have you do a few times. And I mean, really, the DLC offers up both a lot more of the combat and a lot more of the horror. When it comes to the action, you not only fight in new areas, but you do it with new weapons as well. There's a laser carbine that can slice enemies to pieces, as well as a minigun, both of which are super fun to use and are weapons I sort of wish we got in the main game, especially that minigun.
Dear God, it's beautiful.
There's also a newly added turret that can be deployed on pretty much any surface and really does some of the heavy lifting, especially in those sections where you have to hold off multiple waves of enemies. And on the horror side, there's still a lot of Alma, but then there's also the deaths of your squad mates, both of which are super creepy. I mean, Holiday's death genuinely shocked me. The way he gets thrown around like a baby in a dryer, but then the way he gets Johnny Depped right at the end. Extraction Point is only a few hours long and eventually comes to an end with the point man reaching said extraction point, but then the chopper is destroyed and he just kind of gets left stranded.
They will die. All of them.
Now, the second DLC, Perseus Mandate, has you playing as a different character altogether, part of a separate F.E.A.R team sent in to deal with another Armacam facility. This time you're joined by two other F.E.A.R members for quite a bit of the runtime, one of whom is actually voiced by the absolutely excellent Steve Bloom.
The explosion took everything offline. I don't hold out much hope for the other team.
You're gonna kill my dick? Well, I'll kill your dick!
And Perseus Mandate is actually a lot less horror-centric than Extraction Point or F.E.A.R's main campaign. Most of it is you blasting your way through more replicants and ATC forces. There are a few new weapons added here as well, like a new assault rifle that features a scope, similar to the ASP, and a lightning arc cannon and a grenade launcher. There's also a new enemy type referred to as a scarecrow, which provides more of an environmental hazard where you have to navigate around them rather than, just shoot them. Perseus Mandate also has a proper sort of boss fight, where at the end you'll take on a mercenary commander and waves of enemies before eventually escaping an army camp facility.
Team's gonna need a new lieutenant after this. I think Janet wanted to be you.
And what I really appreciate about both of the DLCs is how interconnected they feel with the overall narrative. Extraction Point takes place immediately after that nuclear explosion from the main game, and you get to see the aftermath of it, including this plane crashing. And in Perseus Mandate, you actually get to see the explosion from another point of view, and eventually you see that same crashed plane. I mean, it just gives the whole thing a real sense of continuity and cohesion, and it's actually a big reason why I think F.E.A.R 2 works as a sequel and F.E.A.R 3 doesn't. Cause in F.E.A.R 2, you actually get to see that core explosion from yet another perspective as you actually attempt to find a character that's mentioned in F.E.A.R 1. But then in F.E.A.R 3, you just start out in a Brazilian prison. Like, okay? And it's worth mentioning too that the DLC are actually considered non-canon when it comes to the events of the rest of the series. I mean, in Extraction Point you find the body of your squad mate Jin, but then in F.E.A.R 3 she's still alive.
A ghost in the flesh.
And I think that's a bit of a shame, because I really think that F.E.A.R's DLCs are excellent, and certainly a hell of a lot better than what we got with F.E.A.R 3. A game that really deserves its own video, if only to talk about how much of a disappointment it was. But despite the franchise ending in a whimper, that first F.E.A.R game is still an absolute all-timer. I mean, it's one of the few games I keep installed on my PC at all times, just to be able to play through it once a year or so. Or even to just boot it up, shotgun a few dozen replicants into the next dimension, and call it a night. And it's a game that I have a hard time really criticizing, mainly because I think it's achieved all of the goals that it set out to accomplish. A lot of people at the time took issue with the levels feeling repetitive, and yeah, I see what they mean with the offices and the industrial settings, but I guess I've just never felt that way. If only because I felt like I was always engaged with the combat, and as soon as I felt like I was in one place for too long, F.E.A.R introduced a new area, like a rooftop or a parking garage. And it's a criticism that was directly addressed in those DLCs with entirely new locations. I think the only real issue with F.E.A.R is that getting it to run on modern hardware can be a bit of a pain in the ass, requiring a few mods to patch it and to make the HUD actually readable to anyone who doesn't have a magnifying glass on hand. Monolith really could have played it safe, attempting to make a game to compete with other popular titles like Halo, Half-Life, or Call of Duty. But instead of that, they made a wholly original feeling shooter despite a lot of its obvious influences. They made an AI that still stands the test of time, and gunplay so visceral that you can still find it massively enjoyable even when compared to more contemporary shooters. And this is actually one of the last titles we'd really get before Call of Duty set the trend of more modern military-style shooters in 2007, where even F.E.A.R 2 was influenced, adding features like aiming down sights and cookable grenades. But F.E.A.R does live on through other titles, with Trepang being the most obvious. But even then, I do think it's a real shame there's been no real effort to get it on modern consoles, or to get a more up-to-date version of it on PC. It is a certified good old game, and regularly goes on sale, but I'd still like it to be more available to people who want to play it.
You're goddamn right.
But look, man, if you haven't played F.E.A.R yet, and you have the means, you should. It's a game that stands the test of time along with other titles from that era like Half-Life 2, Halo 2, and Oblivion. And with this being the era of the remake, with even the Max Payne games making a comeback, maybe we'll finally see a F.E.A.R remake. Still though, even if we never get another F.E.A.R game proper, the folks who worked at Monolith should be goddamn proud of the work they did, really creating a shooter that remains impressive to this day.
Here we go again.